Hello, friends out there in podcast land. This is Ed Hartman, once again, in Ed Hartman's Wild World of Music and Film. And I have today the most remarkable, amazing person I've ever met. Well, maybe. Brad Rushing. I think I got his name correct. Correct, yeah. Anyway, he is a cinematographer. In other words, well, I'll let him explain it. It has something to do with cameras, I know that. And it's kind of important in movies. Because without a cinematographer, I don't think you can have a movie. Well, you can have an iPhone, I guess. But anyway, we'll go into that. So welcome, Brad.
Hi, how you doing? Happy to meet you.
You bet. Thank you very much. What this podcast was about, at least when I started it a few weeks ago, was music and film, because that's kind of what I know, the music side, and I'm learning more and more about the film side as I've now become a producer, whatever. And you responded, and I was really, really happy to hear from not just a director or producer, but a cinematographer, because my wife actually mentioned something quite interesting. She said, well, the cinematographer is somewhat related to the composer in that part of the audio is created by the composer and the visual aspect is created by the cinematographer for the director and the producer. So do you agree with that? I mean, is that kind of a correct premise of what the cinematographer's role really is in the film?
Oh, I think that's a very appropriate analogy. And partnered with us would be the production designer who designs the sets and the environments, and even the editor who takes our work and makes all the bits and pieces coalesce into a whole. But yeah, each of us are creative partners overseeing, a specific domain.
Yeah. I hadn't really never thought about that. But, more and more as a composer, I see people tend to underestimate the power of the musical side. They see it as kind of an afterthought, something, a little bit of ambient sound to create a little atmosphere or something. But often it becomes the driving character in a movie. And it's really kind of half the ball game, between the dialogue, the sound effects, and the music. That's half the experience in a film, and it tends to get kind of the last part of the.
Yeah, well, there's a synergy between all of those things. I'm a musician myself. I've written songs. I love, expressing myself in that way as well. And one of the things that I learned early on as a camera person, as a cinematographer, is that there is this really fantastic musicality to the world, to performances. I could be camera operating a shot, and internally I'll have a metronome, and as I'm panning from this person to, this person says a line, that person says a line, they reach down, they pick up a book, and there's actually a rhythm. It's not infallible because they're not intentionally tuned into that, but more often than not, there are rhythms that will guide me as an operator.
Right.
And one of the things also that I find interesting is when I cut my montages for my website, the usual way to do something like that is to pick a song and then conform the imagery to the rhythm of the song, which to me is artificial because my whole intention is leading with the images. So I will take the images with no sound, and I will just cut on the natural beats of those motions and those camera moves. And the most extraordinary thing manifests, because once that's done, I will just find a song that fits the mood and the rhythm, and I'll drop it in. You'd be surprised at how many times it just fits, and maybe there's a little nip and a tuck here.
Right.
But the whole point is that I find that there's a profound synergy, and I know that as a composer, you could tell me a lot of when you see the movie, those images and colors and light and shadow are inspiring, melodic and tonal and thematic evolutions in what you're creating. So I really love it. It's such a, to be able to do that dance with a fellow creative soul is such a joy. And obviously it's even more readily manifest in music videos. If you're shooting or operating on something that is images specifically created to accompany a song, you just feel like you tune into the universe when you're creating that.
All right, let's go into the questions here. And this is kind of a good way for me to kind of at least not have to worry so much. Anyway, so where are you from and where are you living now?
I am from Houston, Texas. I was born and spent the first 25 years of my life there. And I still have a very strong connection to the city. Family still lives there. Up until the pandemic, I went back every year for Christmas. And I've done some projects there. I still am very close with people in the film community there. And then in 1990, I moved to Los Angeles, and I lived in several different neighborhoods here. I lived in Koreatown. I lived in close to Los Feliz, lived in Shadow Hills, and I currently live in Pasadena.
There you go. And just curious, Houston, say nowadays, you feel the film community is somewhat strong, or is it okay? How's their incentives down there? Do they have activity going on?
Right. Well, strong is a relative word. I feel like there should be more opportunity. There's some extraordinarily talented people there. There are some very experienced people there. And on top of that, there are a lot more of ambitious, talented folks who would love to grow into the industry. I wish there was more opportunities. When I started in the late 80s, the city got some pretty major films that would come through, like RoboCop 2 and I Come in Peace. And I was fortunate to work as a camera assistant on those. I don't know that anything that big has come through in a while. Since the time that I was there, this whole incentive thing has come into play, which I don't remember that being part of the conversation then, and maybe they didn't even exist. But now it's a powerful way for markets to draw that work to their communities. The thinking in the Texas decision makers, I don't know that filmmaking is a priority, and I think it's a chicken or the egg thing. Yeah. I think when the lawmakers are looking at those incentives, they're saying, well, that's a tiny fraction of our industry. Why should we invest in something that's, so slight? But at the same time, unless you invest in it, it's not going to grow. So, that's a back and forth that's going on between people who, many friends of mine who are in the industry are lobbying and presenting and trying to make the case, to people who just, are not convinced that it's where that money should be directed. There is an incentive. It's not a huge incentive. And one of the other concerns is that it's split between the film industry and the video game industry. So that dilutes it a bit more.
Yeah, Seattle's lost a lot of steam on it. And we have a very strong film community up here. Vancouver, BC, of course, is Hollywood North. Yep. And tons of stuff. I work with people up there occasionally, and wow.
I've worked in Vancouver several times. I have family up there. My mother's Canadian, so I have friends who work in that industry. That's another, because I've worked there, because I know people. That's another community, at least online, that I participate in, and really some terrific people. There's directors I know. Vanessa Paris, for instance, a really fantastic director, and she's worked up there a lot. She was a showrunner on the new Charmed, and then another friend of mine recently went up there, and she was talking about how she had to quarantine for 14 days, but she went up there to direct an episode of a TV series.
Yeah. So you've been in LA for 30 years. Wow. Yeah.
Coming up on 31, I tell you, it's a nice place. I love it. There's a lot of reasons I love LA. And the funny thing too is that it was kind of a seamless transition between here and Houston. There's a surprising amount of things that are similar between the cities. There are some things that are significantly different, but there are also some things that when I came here, it felt like home very quickly. And one of those things, interestingly, is that a fair number of people that I knew in Houston, even classmates of mine at high school for performing in visual arts and University of Houston, are here as well. So it's fun.
Yeah. Well, I get down there occasionally. I was down there a lot for film festivals for the As the Earth Turns, and wow, I mean, what an experience down there. You know, if I could get down there a couple times a year, I would. So, you know, and again, people come up here all the time from there as well. So, yeah, but that's great to hear. I've been in Seattle since '79. Long time here.
Yeah.
So, if you go back in time, how did you start? Was film first? Was music first? What was first for you?
Well, first was drawing as a little kid with crayons. And then I just pursued my passion and took a lot of art classes. And, you know, I mentioned the high school for performing in visual arts. I auditioned and was accepted as in the fine art department. And when I was there, one of my friends in the media department, which is a filmmaking and photography and journalism department, he was making a film, and he came into the art department and he said, "Hey, does anybody in here want to draw cells for an animated sequence in this film?" And I said, "Oh man, that sounds like fun." Because I always like, you know, trying new things, and that just sounded like a blast. And I'd never done it before. So I read up. I mean, this was 1981, 82. So there was no internet. I don't even remember. I mean, I must have gone to the library and got a book, you know, but I read about how it's done, and I did it on cells with India ink and a Koh-i-Noor repeatograph pen, and I got the paints. There's this great place in Texas called Texas Art Supply in Houston, Texas Art Supply. And they had all the animation supplies. I bought the cells. I bought the colored paint. I painted this background, this long strip, because it was a guy walking. And so I painted it with watercolors. And then I had to move it. Well, actually, I didn't do the animation. My friend shot the animation, but then he would have to move that. But, you know, it was fun. And when I first saw it and I saw this thing I had drawn in motion, it was a revelation. I mean, for the gosh, how much I would have been, you know, 16, 17 years old. And up to that point, you know, everything had been this static, you know, I created it, there it was, it didn't change, and it stayed the same to this day. But this was something that was living and breathing in time, and I just became enchanted.
Well, as a kid, I was in Super 8.
Yeah.
And I still have my Bolex macro lens camera with it looks like it has a magazine on the top, but it's actually for the cartridge. But whenever I would shoot with it, people thought I was a professional because it looked like a giant magazine, you know, on the top. But I used to do cheesy animations with friends, and occasionally with toys, and move them around and get the hand in there every once in a while, you know.
It's interesting because I didn't have that experience for whatever reason. My parents we never had an 8mm camera. We never had a video camera. It was either not a priority or they thought we couldn't afford it. We had still cameras, but until I got into, honestly, you know, I played a little bit with photography. I had some classes, like some black and white and develop your own film, especially in college. I had a couple. But until I had gone through college, come out thinking I wanted to be a director, worked a year as a camera operator on a home shopping show, had that company go under and say, that's not what I want to do. I want to make movies. And then I volunteered on a film a friend was making on his credit card. And I got on that set. It wasn't until that moment that I thought cinematographer is what I want to do, because that's the person making the pictures. That's the person painting with light. And that's the person who gets to play with all the toys, you know, because I'm a tech geek. I'm like, give me the toys. But yeah, and up to that point, photography and certainly motion photography was not a big part of my experience. So I entered it from that fine art perspective. And you asked about music. I began, you know, I began playing guitar when I was, I don't know, 15. And then I started writing my own songs. And I remember playing in bands and trying to get friends to commit to practice. And then when I started recording, trying to get them to come over and play parts. And I could never find people with the same level of commitment as I had. I would stay there. I would deliberately write parts that were too hard to play, so I had to learn them. And then I would just practice until I got it right. And I would be up all night trying to get this one part. And nobody else had that level of commitment. So what happened is I learned to play bass. I learned to play keyboard. I never learned to play drums, but I learned to program drums. And I became my own session musician. And so that was going on simultaneously with high school for performing and visual arts. It was going on simultaneously with my film studies. And then I remember when I graduated college, at some point I had a thought that, I have all these loves, fine art, music, film. What do I pick? And the decision at the time was I'll go with whichever one pays first.
Yeah, that's me. That's where I follow the money.
Yeah.
So, well, that's interesting about the music because you obviously have done a lot of music videos. So I'm guessing all that training really paid off. And that was some of your first experience as cinematographers doing music video, right?
That's actually not true.
Oh.
Yeah. My first experiences were as a camera assistant in Houston on bigger stuff. And I realized pretty early on that you get pigeonholed. So if you're a second AC and you want to be a first AC or a camera operator, it takes some convincing for people to believe, that you've stepped up. And I'll also say that while I was working as an assistant camera in film, I was simultaneously working as a camera operator on video, on live events, things like concerts and sporting events. And one of the things that was brilliant about that, it was amazing training because there are no retakes, there are no redos. You better get it right. So you build up these instincts, and that's where I learned to anticipate the rhythms of people, because you're on this 1,000-millimeter lens at one end of an arena, and there's this little tiny guy on stage going back and forth. What's he gonna do? Is he gonna change? And this one time I was following, it was Eazy-E, the rapper Eazy-E, and I'm following, and suddenly he was gone, and the technical director is saying, "Brad, where is he? You've lost him." And I zoomed out, and the stage is empty, and then I see this hand come up from the side of the stage, and he crawls up on the stage. He had walked off the stage and fallen off.
Oh, geez.
But one of the things that they always tell you, the TDs, the technical directors, the guy selecting cameras, is always give me a shot, because you don't know when I'm going to come to you. And they could even come to you accidentally, and they don't want you to be focusing or looking at a cute girl in the audience or whatever. I mean, they want a viable shot. And that's something I learned, is always be giving shots. And even when I'm shooting now, if I'm a director of photography on a show and I have multiple cameras and I have a third camera and there's not a shot for it, I say, give me B-roll, give me inserts, give me stuff to help the editor out. You're sitting there, it's not like we're burning through expensive celluloid anymore. It's like, give me content, always be shooting something. If the actor turns away and your shot is busted, find another shot.
Well, it's very, very similar to music. I did a lot of improvising growing up and playing in jazz and stuff like that. And I find that for scoring, a lot of scoring I do is based on improv, and then go from there. And the secret of improv is never stopping. You never admit it. You do something, and if you play a note and you want to hit the wrong note, you hit another one and you keep going. You make correct whatever that was and make it make sense.
You're right. There's a great quote, and I saw it recently, and maybe you can tell me who said it. It was one of the jazz greats, but was saying, when you're playing an instrument and you hit an off note, It's the next note you play that
Next note.
determines whether it was the right or the wrong one.
That's right. And I've heard that one before, and I've lived by that.
That's brilliant. Well, yeah, it's that whole I meant to do that philosophy, and I totally own that.
Never acknowledge a mistake ever.
Well, but I mean,
no reason.
And is it even a mistake? Because as humans,
that's right.
How perfect are we? And as a creator, I know you have those moments where you almost feel like you're channeling it. It's not even you. So what is that? And if the universe gifts you this dissonant blue note and you dance with it and make it work, then was it a mistake?
Yeah, and the last thing anybody wants to see in a concert is an artist on stage hesitating and wondering if they, it's this. There's nothing more uncomfortable than somebody going, it's just.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I've been on sets before where all hell was breaking loose. One of the things I always say to people is Murphy is on the call sheet, whether you put him there or not. I mean, you just have to expect. It's not if, it's when. What's his call time? So I've been on sets where all hell was breaking loose, and I'm just sitting there completely cool and calm. And I've had people say, "Why aren't you freaking out? Aren't you anxious?" And I'm like, you know what? It's not going to help anything. It's not going to make anything better. And if people see me freaking out, they're going to freak out. So it's like, right. We will process this. We will deal with this. We will take the talent that we have assembled in ourselves and our crews, and we will make the best pivot that we can. And you know what? Sometimes we come out in a better situation than we would have if the thing had gone the way we'd hoped it to. So there's no value for yourself or the people who are looking to you for leadership to ever have that oops moment. I mean, like I said, it's a dance. You pivot, you have a partner, and the partner does something expected, and you lean into that. As a creative person, it's a challenge. Just like that, hitting that note that you didn't mean to play, that's an opportunity to go somewhere new and try something you've never tried before, and maybe have something amazing that you never even anticipated.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up going to Second City in Chicago, and that's all about working your way out of a situation and moving into the next. And of course, a lot of those people went to Saturday Night Live, and when you watch that show, what you're really looking for is somebody to break character and start laughing. That's actually the best part, is when they kind of go, they can't.
My parents, we used to watch the Carol Burnett show.
Yeah, loved right. It. Same thing.
And a highlight, they just loved when Tim Conway would break Harvey Korman. I mean, that was just a thing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I try to do that here as much as possible.
Pardon?
I try to do that here as much as possible. That's me. No, I as a teacher, like when I teach students, I'm always trying to loosen them up and tell jokes and stuff like that. I can't take anything seriously anymore. Something when you get old enough,
We talk about Second City. I spent some time camera operating a show for the Groundlings.
Yeah, I've been there. I have a friend who played there for a long time.
Yeah, and I one of my friends, Brian Palermo, is a longtime participant, and he's just such a brilliant comedian and actor and improv artist. And I remember watching those improv shows that I was shooting, and it was just stunning, and it was so brilliant. And they would go these amazing places, and it hardly ever went wrong. I mean, when I think of some of my favorite sketch shows like Saturday Night Live or Monty Python, I think those scripted skits went wrong as often, or maybe even more than the improv. It's, it's funny. I have this golden veneer of what the original Saturday Night Lives were, but then, you get those actual shows and you watch them, and there are these skits and bits that are just like, what? They cut those out in the retrospect, so you forget about them. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean, the cowbell sketch, which I've actually performed live, is, the whole thing's just a big mistake. It doesn't even make sense, but it's just about the delivery, well, cowbell. It's just how he says stuff that's as impressive as anything else. People
And
are falling over everybody, knocking stuff over.
it's so completely unlikely. I mean, Blue Oyster Cult and Don't Fear the Reaper with a what? You might as well put a harmonica in it as
Right. That's
much
right.
as a
That's right.
bloody cowbell.
No,
And
I ran a drum shop for 25 years, and we actually at our 20th celebration we performed the skit. And what was funny is I fell over a mic stand at exactly the same moment as they did on the show, not even planning it. It was just
that's the universe, man.
yeah,
That's the universe right there.
serendipitous. Anyway, okay, so continuing on. The next question is kind of related to the first one, when and why you started in your field. We've kind of answered a little bit of that, but was there any kind of inspiration? And this is the next question too. So what kind of inspired you to do all of this? Was it, what drew you into it?
To be broad, it's all the same well. It's all a translation of emotions into a form of not necessarily verbal communication. I suppose with lyrical music, which I've written, that's verbal, but with cinematography, it's not. With melodies, with arrangements, with drawings. Often when I was creating art in art school, it wasn't necessarily figurative in the sense that it was literal. It could be, a color. I remember it was so fantastic. I had an art theory class in college, and I think all of us sort of innocently come to art with that perspective of, if it's recognizable to me, it has value, and if it's not recognizable, what the hell is it? Just like people going into a gallery and saying my child could paint that. They're missing something. They're missing part of what that is. And it's okay, you don't know. And I went into that as well. And one of the things that was nice about this art theory class was it really dove into some of the more obscure forms of expression, things like found art. And found art is where you go out and you find a discarded porcelain toilet and display it in a museum. And yeah, you could say that that's a really shitty thing to do. Yeah. Do you like what I did there?
Yes.
But it's purposeful. It's what is in that sense, you need to know the artist's intent and the context, and it's a personal experience. You can still say it's crap. You can still say I that's not art to me, but then somebody else equally can say that it is. And one of the ones that was really, that opened up my eyes, was that he showed us this slide of a black square. And I thought, well, okay, it's a black square. It's just, that does nothing for me. And he explained that what that was is it was a backdrop behind a play in an Eastern European country under an oppressive regime.
Wow.
And I thought, well, it still may not make sense, but what he explained to us was, when you think of what's up in the sky, what is it? It's a bright circle. It's the sun. It's a bright circle. So here you have the antithesis. You have a black square overhanging this performance in a country at a time where you could be jailed for criticizing or questioning. And so suddenly it transforms from a stupid, uninspired black square into a profound subversive statement.
Right.
So
I teach acoustics of music in my lesson plan, and this would be an interesting time to talk about it, because again, you really were an artist before anything.
Yeah.
And I was never a very good artist, but I know how to copy things okay. But I've often looked at the comparisons. I've worked with dancers and compared the parameters of sound to the parameters of movement. And you can do the same thing working with visual art. So if we go through those one at a time, we have melody, and that would be related in art to what? How would you match that up? What would be the closest parameter of art?
Well, what I would, if I was gonna abstract melody, I would call it thematic modulation. That's just an abstract term, and so in that sense, it would be playing those emotional notes, that you're modulating the emotion of the audience. You're taking them on a journey.
So there is time goes by with melody. In other words, that's like that. And
right.
you know, you could look at that as height in you also in geography in a picture. How about in film? What would you relate melody to?
It's a little bit more analogous because with the pictorial art, you do not get to set the tempo. You do not get to set the pace. The audience will discover those elements, and you can have some control, some design. I mean, there are some intuitive and also theoretical ways to direct the viewer's eye. Like, what do they look at first? What's largest in the frame? What's most in focus? Where does the contrast, or where do the, you know, converging lines make the eye go? These are things you think about in a two-dimensional fixed sense. So that's how you direct them into that journey you want them to take, but you still don't have 100% control. With a film, you have some control because there is a passage of time. You see this and now it's gone, and here's the next thing. So you can take them on that melodic journey, and you can have those counter melodies too, because you can have, like, here's this person saying and doing something, meanwhile in the background there's this thing, and you perceive that it's a threat to this person. So, you know, it's that interplay.
Counterpoint for that sort of thing.
That's exactly
absolutely
right.
So you have, you know, intersecting characters and development. This is fascinating to me because as a composer, I do the reverse. I'm looking at the scene and I'm devising how do I want to match whatever's going on there acoustically, you know, sound wise. So, you know,
but the way that you were asking, how do you do that? You start first of all by considering, you know, what's in the frame, and you know, there's me, and there's these cats, and there's this horse, and I'm sure that people looking at this have glanced at those. And so if I was intentionally framing it and I wanted to create meaning, I might position it in a certain way. And then also the camera movement. Where do you direct it to? Do I start on me and then tilt up to the horse? And then do I cut to a picture of a horse running across a savanna and then a little girl crying? I've suddenly created a little emotional journey. And in your brain, you're thinking, what's the connection between that guy and that painting and that wild horse and that little girl? And the beautiful thing is that the audience becomes our partner. Just like with your songs, you have an intention, and you take them on a journey, but they become a partner because, you know, your melancholy song about, you know, tea with your grandmother would resonate with somebody else as a lost love or a missed opportunity, and it's just as valid, you know, their experience, you know, because art and music and film is personal. And I'm not so possessive and arrogant as to say that my intention is the ultimate defining one, and that's wrong. And I love that when I create, to create that ambiguity, to create those enigmas, because it's just like with music, you know, you're playing along and then you stop and there's that moment of anticipation, and then you start again. And in that moment of anticipation, the audience is still going, you know. Right. Yeah. It's like in concerts when they get them to sing or they get them to clap, you know.
And rhythm comes from silence as well, the opposite of sound. When I go,
yep,
that anticipation is killer. That's as important as and that's why John Cage wrote 4:33, which is 4 minutes and 33 seconds and nothing. Although some people say that's the audience screaming, wanting their money back. But
I always tell people who, you know, at the beginning of the year, I say, you know, if your New Year's resolution is to become a musician and you don't have time, perform John Cage's 4:33 for your friends and family. You know, which is funny because all the musicians get the in joke, and then the people who don't understand are, oh, maybe I'll do that.
I've seen some great versions of it. I saw a version of it at Cornish in Seattle, where the professor played it and he was in front of a gong. And that was a great instrument to choose because the anticipation of wanting him to hit the gong was very strong.
Yeah.
But he never hit it.
Yeah, John Lennon plagiarized that twice. He had an album with 2 minutes of silence and another with the Utopian national anthem, and both of them are note for note identical to 433. And I'm surprised that he was never sued for that.
Damn right.
But yeah, somehow we had too much fun with that because I forget. Oh yeah, we were talking about the journey and the counterpoints and all of that. But the thing that I like to do as a filmmaker, and I'm actually developing some content right now, a couple of screenplay ideas. I'm not a screenwriter, but one of them is a concept I came up with, and the other is a historical figure, and I'm partnering with friends. But you know, to deliberately leave those ambiguities and enigmas, and it, you know, you're talking about you know, that those moments of silence in song, and in visual art, that's negative space. You know, what's the part that you don't fill, and it should be as deliberate as the part you fill. But when you leave that emptiness, when you leave that space, when you leave that ambiguity, that's when the audience, their imagination or their engagement, they fill that with potential. One of my favorite movies is Alien. And in Alien, the original one from 1979, there's only one brief shot of that full monster. Beyond that, it's little bits and pieces and flashes. And the thing that is just so brilliant about that, I've worked with low budget filmmakers who are like, you know, we paid a lot for this monster, we want to see it. Well, there's two problems. First of all, if it's not well done, you're just showing off how shitty it is. Right. But in a movie like Alien, when you've got, you know, these pieces, what's happening is the audience's imagination is taking that little clue and turning it into their worst fear, not what you say their worst fear should be, but their worst fear, their personal nightmare. You know, again, just like your song about tea with your grandmother, it's somebody else's wedding song that when they're 80 years old, they're crying and dancing to. That's just the beautiful thing, is we put it out there, and if we leave that ambiguity in, you know, other people will own it.
My favorite horror movie of all time is 1963, Robert Weiss, The Haunting. Yeah. There's nothing seen in the entire film except for a character that startles you, and it's pure psychological horror with a beautiful score. But that, to this day, that's the scariest movie I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's the attenuation of emotion. Yeah. You know, a very wise person, you know, once said, it's all about anticipation. Right.
That's why Hitchcock worked.
Yeah. So anyway, it's look, there's a lot of psychology in what we do, whether it's you know, intentional or whether it's innate. And I think a lot of it's innate because we're just playing with our own emotions. And, you know, as you are creating something and you begin to feel it, that can lead you. But that emotion is so universal that other people pick up on it.
So just a couple more quick things like we were talking about. I just talked about melody. Another parameter of sound is dynamics, soft, loud. So, and it's pretty obvious. And you know, again, it creates anticipation, all the rest of that sort of thing. And one other thing about melody and harmony, I've noticed that low pitches are big animals, like, you know, sharks and stuff like that. And tiny little things like this, those are kind of creepy crawly stuff. The stuff in the middle is stuff that generally doesn't scare us, which is why low and high frequencies are so bizarre for film. So melody can have really impacting thing in visual art form. But thinking about dynamics, they're also the nature of decibels is exponential by nature. It's logarithmic. So you know, the difference between a pin drop and a jet plane is like 10 trillion to 1. So, you know, intensity is a definition of loudness in music. So let's go to film. Forget about visual art for a second. You're creating intensity. How are you creating that visually? What would be the tools that would do
There's
that?
a lot of ways. I mean, we could do a show just about that, but let me give you one example. One example, okay? Is how do you frame a character in an emotional scene? So let's imagine there's an emotional scene between two characters. Now, we could film them in profile and we see them in context with one another, right?
Yeah.
We could come around and now we're doing a close-up on this person over this person's shoulder, or we could come in and get right up in their face. And so what I find is you're attenuating those moments of, okay, we're giving context, there's the two people, right? And as this conversation progresses, I consider myself the audience's proxy. So where do I feel I want to be in this emotional moment? And what I like to do, I want to get drawn in. And it's all in the actor's eyes. It's all their face and their emotions. And so as you come closer, you know, for instance, if the eye line is like this, it's less intimate. Now it's a little more intimate. The closer you come to looking right into their eyes, instinctively as a human, the more, you know, it's if there's an emotional moment where somebody's angry with you or you're ashamed, it's hard to look into their eyes. And so you have that, you know, you're forcing the audience into this emotional experience. And I say forcing, maybe that's not the right word. You're again, you're modulating the emotion of the film. And so it's just knowing, you know, when those things are what they are, and you can use them like maybe you have a moment where you feel you would want to be there, but you want the audience to disconnect, so you deliberately go to an angle that's a really wide, or it's, you know, it's off angle of their eyes and they can't quite see their eyes. So you've played a note, you've played an intentional manipulation, or the actor is saying something that's very emotionally uncomfortable, and you linger on this ECU, you know, and it's just it's uncomfortable, and you just keep it going and keep it going and keep it going. One of my favorite examples of this is in the film Rosemary's Baby. I read an article with the cinematographer, and there was a scene with Ruth Gordon, who's just a magnificent actress, and she's sitting on a bed on the phone, and the camera is at the end of a hall looking at her through the door. And the director said, you know, go ahead and place that camera. And the, you know, cinematographer placed it, and he had this nice frame with, you know, Ruth Gordon framed in the door. And the director said, no, move the camera over, move it over more. So he moves it and he kind of crowds her, and the director looked at it, said, move it over some more. And he just kept cranking it over, so you couldn't see Ruth Gordon's face anymore. And the cinematographer's going, okay, well, that's weird. There's this emotional moment and you can't see the actor's face. So they finish the film, they do a screening, the cinematographer watches when this scene comes on, and the shot comes on with Ruth Gordon and you can't see her face, and the whole audience goes, lean around and see her face. Yeah. And that's exactly, you know, what you're trying to do is get them so engaged that they forget that it's a two-dimensional movie.
In music, you have, you know, again, the difference between soft and loud. And the quicker it is, everything's relative. So if this is my loud, then that's not a lot louder. But if this is my loud, if this is my loud, or this is my soft, and this is my loud, you know, you get startled. Same idea.
Well, there's other things
jump like scares and things like that are going to play in similarly.
Yeah. In cinematography, there's other things. You know, I could have talked about contrast. I could have talked about perspective. I could have talked about relative positions. I could have talked about, you know, colors and, you know, absences of colors, saturation or lack of saturation. All of those are amplitudes of one kind or another.
As I explore iMovie, I'm learning a lot about that.
There's a lot of toys in the toy box, and you could get overwhelmed if you think about them, but that's why it's best to approach it emotionally and be open to just kind of channel the experience and see where it leads you, rather than just, you know, trying to artificially throw stuff at it.
Well, let's continue this, because this is a really nice little way to do it. So in music, you have duration as another parameter of long tones, short tones. Now that creates rhythm in itself. So we've talked about that a little bit, and obviously the length of a shot would be somewhat related to that, or the duration of a character movement versus short movements, things like that. what comes to mind as far as, not as far as rhythm, but more the duration of tone as relative to picture?
Sure. Well, it's interesting because, yeah, you're taking the audience on a journey. Again, you are their proxy in that world. You are their proxy in that scene. Do you want to follow, like, you're behind an actor and they're going through a spooky house and you're staying there with them as though you're their friend right on their shoulder, and you're experiencing it at the same time in real time, and then you look around the corner and, oh my God, or there's these movies that are one-shot movies where
Right.
that's the whole thesis, all the way back to when Hitchcock did it with Rope. So I'm very intentional about movement. I have to say, I'm not a fan of gratuitous movement. There's a school of thought that you just want that dynamism. But I think superfluous dynamism is like superfluous anything. I mean, why, what is your intention? I think that there should be some kind of a reason, even if it's not conscious. I think there should be a reason for the choices that you make, and that you just shouldn't impose a stylistic technique. That would be like you just saying, I like arpeggios, so I'm going to put an arpeggio in this song, whether it fits or not. God damn it,
Well, that's the nature of commercial music.
Well, but you get the point. It's like, I'm gonna put a xylophone in this. It might be the greatest.
I have xylophones.
Well, hey, AC/DC put AC/DC put a bagpipe in a song, right?
Yeah. All right. So again, rhythm, length, duration. The final parameter of sound is timbre quality. It's the difference between a flute and a violin, the different harmonic spectrum. Voice, is a sawtooth wave. Whoo is a sine wave. Ow, we control that with our mouth. We filter in and out harmonics, which create the change, like that. And it's, when I've thought about it with visual art, I tend to think of it as color a lot of times. But it can be, again, translated in movement, in film, or movement in other ways, as in intensities of different things. But if you were thinking about, orchestration, particularly flutes, violins, electronics, things like that, how would they translate parallel in the world of visual image?
Well, I think, here's a for instance. If to me, a very quiet and gentle thing would be a scene, maybe an interior scene with no direct light, just very soft shape on people's faces. You don't have this kind of contrast. It's a low contrast, very peaceful scene, not a lot of objects in the frame, very simple, parsimonious, and a quiet performance by the actors, just something where you are just kind of lingering and the audience feels peaceful and engaged, as opposed to, the opposite end of that spectrum would be a scene which is very high contrast, very bright brights and dark darks, and the camera looks and the light just blasts and flares the lens, and the audience squints their eyes, and then it pans and it's dark shadow, and maybe you see a figure and you can barely make the figure out. So that to me would be that same type of dynamic relationship between the visuals as what you're describing between a flute or a violin or a waterphone or a theremin or whatever.
Yeah. Good. That fascinates me to no end. I honestly, this is what I'm looking for in filmmakers, are ways to connect with image, with in the reverse, where I usually we have a chicken or the egg situation in most filmmaking, and generally, most of the time, the image is first and the music follows. On occasion, like the end of Close Encounters, where John Williams created the music first, which is one reason it has such a musical quality to it. It's an orchestral piece, stands alone by itself, because they didn't have the effects done. So there was nothing to see. And I think that's fascinating that he was able to do that pen and paper as well on top of that. So, but again, I tend to react to image. The reverse would be kind of music video, where the song is first, and then you have to create image to to the music. And that's a different process. I've done that myself with my old tracks, and my own tracks, a different thing. So when you approach that, you have a director, of course, who's maybe and a screenwriter or whoever creates the story. And then as a cinematographer, you have to adapt those ideas and that song after the fact to that. Do you find that more challenging, or is it equal, or?
It's, it's a different beast. And, people ask me, what do you like best? What kind of projects? And my answer is always, I like the variety. I love being able to go from, shooting a period movie in China to shooting a pop video, to shooting a culture, to shooting a commercial. I love it. I love that every day is different and that I get to try new things. It's just like what I was telling you earlier about when I used to write music and I would write parts that were so challenging that I had to learn them. I would have to practice, and I like stretching. I like going new places. And then as far as, music videos, one of the things that's nice about music videos is that there just are no rules, things that apply in narrative filmmaking, like continuity and eye lines. It's, out the window. A music video is a much more purely art for art's sake, potentially purely art for art's sake format. Obviously, you can do a narrative music video. It could be anything under the sun. It could be a single person standing on a white site. It could be, like Beck's video for a Lost Cause, where it's this one long ultra slow-mo shot of a rocket going up and blowing up and crap coming out of it. It could be like, the OK Go treadmill video, which I absolutely adore. It could be like Alanis Morissette's Ironic, where you're playing with 4 different versions of Alanis. It's the sky is the limit. And I think the one thing that people are intentional to not do is be literal. I don't think it does. Look, there's exceptions to every rule, but in general, I think it doesn't do service to a song to be literal, because you're being redundant. And also, I don't think you want to. You're kind of branding the song. You're making it iconic, but you don't want to do it in a way that takes it away from people personalizing it, if that makes any kind of a sense. Yeah. So if you're a little bit arbitrary about it, it can help that out. And there are things that are more effective than others, and I have my personal favorites. What my least personal favorite is cliche. Is my heart always drops when it's another club video or a white site video. It's like, are we going to do something new? Is there a fresh take, or is this,
Are you still doing music videos on occasion?
I do on occasion. I wish I did them more often, because I love them so much. But the generation of music video directors that knew and hired me have moved on to commercials and narrative. And there's a younger generation coming up hiring their peers. And
well, you need to do more old fart videos now.
You know what? Let me tell you something.
It's coming. It's coming.
It would be my dream to shoot a Paul McCartney video.
There you go.
He recently came out with McCartney 3, and I literally reached out through all my channels and said, I'm available and I would love to do that. And I just don't think the message connected, which is too bad, because I've done all these artists who I certainly respect, who are pop icons, but they're not my generation's pop icons. I would, if I could do, Paul or Mick Jagger or Bob Dylan, oh my God, what a dream that would be. That would be such a thrill.
Well, I do have them on my dial here, so I'll give them a holler after this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm joking.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on. What's your best inspirations from filmmakers and composers?
My best inspiration?
I mean, people that have inspired you over the years. Cinematographer, composer, filmmaker, whatever.
Yeah.
Forget about actors. I don't want to talk to them.
Well, I'm gonna leave the obvious for last, and I'm gonna start with a little more obscure. Philip Glass. I love Philip Glass. Koyaanisqatsi was such a bloody amazing film, and
that's
saw
evenly done. That's music and film pretty much done at the same time.
And Powakatsi, Nakoi Katsi.
Yeah.
I saw his opera Akhenaten. Very unconventional, but my God, how brilliant! Let's do that. Vangelis, and who it's like, look, you say John Williams or Philip Glass or Vangelis. There are no duplicates. I mean, those people are their own entity, Tangerine Dream. So I love stuff like that. Even some of the experimental music that was written for 2001 that did not, that Kubrick used the classical music instead. And I think the classical music was fantastic. But when I see that scene with the monolith on the moon and that screechy, dissonant horribleness, as creators, it's not always our job to make people feel warm and fuzzy. So even though that sound is so goddamned unpleasant, it's effective. And that to me, it's brilliant in that.
Yeah. And he used orchestral, bizarro orchestral avant-garde music. Alex North did his score.
That's right. I'm glad you remembered his name.
Yeah, and I've met his daughter, and she's a wonderful music supervisor and publisher. What's interesting about Alex is he wrote that score, and then I don't think Kubrick really ever intended to use it, because I think he had his ideas about using the classical stuff anyway, but he was contracted to. And the downside of the whole thing was Alex went to the premiere in London expecting to hear his score, and didn't, and was humiliated for years. Yeah. It's a tragedy. It's one of the worst cases of that. He got paid for his work, of course, but what a humiliating thing to have happen. It kills me. Well, I've been fired, I get that, but I'd hate to be in a theater and not see my music on screen expecting it.
And you mentioned John Cage. I really like and respect John Cage because he, look, 433, I respect what that is. I respect the idea. I love how cheeky it is. And the fact that he used the prepared pianos, I love that. I used to, right now I'm completely enamored by RGB LED lights because for so many years I was limited in the colors of gels. The producer would say you could have 10 colors or 5 colors and that's it. And now I've got them all. And God, how amazing.
6 million.
but one of the things I used to do is I would combine gels. I would take this color and that color, because I wanted to experiment. And so how awesome that instead of playing the piano, you've gone and added objects to manipulate the sound. I think that's really.
I did in high school. We had a group called Weird Group, and we did Xenakis and all that kind of stuff, and a lot of improv and that sort of thing. I actually performed a piece. Alan Hovhannes is a great composer. He wrote as much music as Bach, and he threw away a bunch before he even did that. He lived in Seattle, and I helped premiere some of his music at a concert series I created in the 80s. And I premiered a couple of pieces that Hovhannes never had out, but they had recorded it on records, on vinyl in the 40s. It was Hovhannes and John Cage that record them. So I share one thing with Cage, in that I'm the only other person that played this piece and John Cage. It's a win.
I love the outliers. I don't know who composed it, but there's a piece that they're playing in Europe that's supposed to take 1,000 years to complete, where they literally, they've mapped it out, and at these intervals of years or whatever, it's this pipe organ, and then they just change the note.
And I want the royalties on that.
But somebody made a movie recently that with John Malkovich that's not supposed to be released for 100 years.
Whoa.
You know, that stuff is weird and obscure, but there's something so cool about thinking outside the box. Look, it's easy to take the obvious choices. And I'm not saying that I'm going to listen to 433 or Alex North's 2001 score for pleasure, but as a creative person, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And, you know, for things like pleasure, again, I like diversity. I love Gregorian chants. I love listening to medieval music. I like world music. I like country. There's hip hop that I like. And, you know, I alluded to the obvious, which is the Beatles. You know, that's not a clever thing of me to say, but, you know, apart from them being hooky, you know, they could also be weird. You've got, you know, Revolution Number 9. You've got, You Know My Name. Again, as a musician, as a filmmaker, I love those opportunities to not be stuck into a little box. You know, they could do a country swing or a waltz or a hard rock song like Helter Skelter. You know, and into their solo years. And, you know, Paul McCartney has written classical. He's written, you know, he's written, you know, EDM. I just think it's fantastic. I love seeing how a composer's sensibility, for instance, you know, McCartney and melody. I like how he's got such an instinct for hooky melodies, and to be able to take that into those other genres and platforms, it's fascinating to see those permutations. So whoever we're talking about, if they stretch, if they, you know, translate their sensibilities, you know, again, Cage and all the various things he did, or Philip Glass, even, you know, Jean-Michel Jarre is another composer I really love. So, you know, again, to me, it's really that bravery of trying new things, and that I like. The ones who, yeah, the more it all sounds alike from year to year and album to album, the less compelling I find it.
For me, when people ask what kind of music I like, I usually say I love the music that I respect the musician more than anything. And like, I'll get gravitated to Zappa because I consider him, you know, pure genius, and the ability to perform, compose, and be his own sound, his own voice, and the whole bit. So, and I get drawn to the Beatles too. They were doing experimental music when I was doing electronic music in high school. You know, it was the same thing. It was, you know, manipulation of tape.
You know, the other one that I want to mention, and I hope you know her name, because her name is not at the top of my head, but who was the composer at BBC Radiophonic Workshop who did the Doctor Who theme?
I don't know.
We should Google her. Oh my God, this is service. That was the original Doctor Who theme.
Wow.
That was composed in 1963. Was not created. It sounds like it was created on a synthesizer, but it wasn't. She generated Delia Derbyshire. I guess that's how you pronounce it in British English. Delia Derbyshire. Yeah. She wrote that by generating each of those tones independently and then cutting the tape.
Yeah, I've done that.
But what a bloody iconic song. Yeah. And, you know, it still sounds very contemporary and weird to us now, but the song is darn near 60 years old. It came out before the Beatles. It came out before the Beach Boys. It came out before, it was proto-electronic music. There was no Philip Glass or Vangelis or Jean-Michel Jarre. You know, it was utterly revolutionary. And because people didn't understand the process of how it had been created, they just took it at face value. But, you know, what a legendary achievement that was. And so, yeah, that's one that I would really highlight.
What about on the filmmaker side? I mean, when you think about great directors or filmmakers in general, who comes to mind that would have, at least not necessarily what you like, but has inspired you?
Yeah. Well, I love Fritz Lang, for instance, Metropolis, those just brilliant
You're
silent.
gonna like As the Earth Turns, because there's Metropolis-y things going on there, and
Um, Jonathan Demme, Stop Making Sense, to me is the best concert film that was ever made. I just absolutely love that film. Godfrey Reggio, the fellow who made Koyaanisqatsi and Palakatsi in collaboration with Philip Glass.
when you want to collaborate on a Koyaanisqatsi thing, let me know, because
Okay.
you'd be the guy. I'd rather do it with a cinematographer than a director, because
Well,
it's really a cinematographer's film.
It's interesting because the cinematographer on the original Koyaanisqatsi, I should Google him too, but he went on to create some similar films, and one of them I believe is called Anima Mundi. I feel I would do a disservice. Ron Fricke, but he went on to direct and create some of that similar stuff. So he had the same idea that you did. But yeah, those guys are fantastic. I hate giving obvious answers because everybody gives the same answers. And look, I think Hitchcock and Kubrick and Ridley Scott, I think those guys are all geniuses and utterly fantastic. So some of the current generations, I really have my eye on Ryan Coogler, who did the Creed stuff and did the Black Panther too. He's such a young guy, but his filmmaking style is so sophisticated.
There's a director who's kind of won Sundance with a short called Thunder Road, Jim Cummings, and he's kind of up and coming, and he knows how to really do independent films, fundraise, and do the whole thing. He got a feature done of that same thing, and the original short was a one shot. They spent about a month rehearsing that, and that was what made it really unique and original, actually. So, but it created a much more of an acting, thing on there.
Terry Gilliam is a favorite.
Oh God, yeah.
I mean,
and musically, his choices are great. To me, Baron Munchausen is a favorite, especially. Who was the composer on that? I can't remember. That's he passed away, I believe. Anyway, man, I just love that score on that.
Yeah,
that's a unique piece. I mean, everything, the visuals, everything is off the charts on that thing.
Yeah. Well, when I see a movie and I think, man, I've never seen anything like this before.
Yeah.
It just gets me so excited. We think of, to us, Star Wars is a pervasive, ubiquitous IP, but I saw, and you probably saw in 1977, a little movie that was unlike anything we had ever seen before. The original Star Wars was like,
yeah.
Before that, we had 2001. We had Star Trek on TV. We had the Jerry Anderson shows like Space 1999. But my God, what was this Star Wars? This space opera. I had the same feeling when I saw Blade Runner,
right,
or when I saw The Matrix. Before those became part of our pop culture vernacular. They were revolutionary, and I love stuff like that. One of my favorite movies is My Dinner with Andre. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah.
It's Andre Gregory and Wallace Shawn, and basically they sit down and they have dinner. And you think it wouldn't work, but I never got bored. I was like, oh my God, I stay with it the whole time, and I love unexpected. And it's so funny because in my formative years as a filmmaker, 3 of the movies I mentioned came out, and my aesthetic was, or my sensibilities were shaped by Koyaanisqatsi, My Dinner with Andre, Stop Making Sense.
That's an interesting night of viewing.
But they all came out about the same time.
Right, yeah.
Plus I was watching foreign films. And I love mainstream movies too. I mean, I love
Right.
Star Wars and I love Star Trek and you know, Black Panther. Those are fantastic movies. But the nice thing is, as a creative person, you know, I've expanded my tastes and my creative palette. You know, it's just like the whole thing about found art and the guy with the porcelain toilet. You can dismiss that, or you can expand the frontier of what is possible in creative expression. And it doesn't mean you have to embrace it or do it, but it adds a color to your palette. It adds, instead of having 88 keys on your keyboard, now you have 89.
Yeah.
So,
well, we're about running out here. We haven't even gotten any of your stuff. I feel bad, but I did watch Tomorrow by Midnight, which is an extraordinary film that you did in 1999. What was funny about that is when I first watched it, I thought, oh, it's a retro film. I wonder where they found the video store. Then I realized, oh, this was probably when there were video stores. That store got destroyed in that movie, though.
well, guess what? That was a set.
Really? It looked like they took it out. I had visions of the Blues Brothers taking out a shopping mall, which never did recover after that shot.
We had a hell of a lot of fun making that.
That's a great movie. It's disturbing as hell. You're not sure if you're watching a comedy, a tragedy, a scary movie, horror movie. I don't know. Because
you're watching all three.
Yes.
The writer and director of that movie, Rolf Ganevsky, is like a walking, talking film library. I mean, You cannot stump him with any kind of obscure film reference.
Wow.
You
put
go
it all in there.
I would go to his house at the time. This is before you have all your movies streaming or on MP4s on your computer, and he would just have all his walls covered with VHS and DVDs and there was no room for paintings or books. And he was and he's, still working. Obviously, he's still got a vibrant career, but he's so familiar with just whatever your favorite genre or director or obscure movie that, like, one of my favorite movies is this film called Eyes of Fire, which was an 80s horror movie. And it was just, to me, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's brilliant. And unfortunately, you can see it on YouTube, but it's not on DVD or Blu-ray. And I've actually tried to track the director down because I would love to encourage him to, partner with somebody like Criterion or Arrow or whoever and just get a remastered copy of that film. But with Rolf, you can talk about that movie and he's seen that movie and he probably knows facts. And so in so many ways, that is kind of a magnum opus for him because it is his personality imprinted into the fabric of that film with those characters. And the banter, where they're their dialogue
references. Somebody knew some history there.
That's
right. I was wondering where that came from. I'm going, man, there's a lot of movie references in this movie.
He just had fun with it. He had so much fun with it. That was
why I like it. Yeah.
And there's a lot of joy in it.
There's an interesting spinning scene around one of the characters that I was fascinated by because the character doesn't really move and things are spinning around him. And this is before a lot of computer stuff, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that was practical. Yeah. Rolf, one of the pleasures of working with Rolf is he will cook up these incredible shots and then you got to figure out how to shoot them. And there were several scenes. We had a really terrific producer, a fellow by the name of Mike Amato, who's still my friend. And we shot that at Roger Corman's studio, Concord, in Venice. Yeah, at the lumberyard, the long lamented and lost lumberyard. And we had, worked in that environment. Some of my early experiences were shooting those films. which, you know, there's a kind of a regimented structure to, you know, cheap and quick. And, you know, for people like Mike, Rolf, and myself, we wanted to make really good content. So we came up with habits and strategies to game the system. How do we get what we want and still not get fired? So, you know, to this day, there are things that I learned, strategies that I apply, you know, to get the most out of my time and limited resources. And even on a multi-million-dollar movie, there are occasions where I use those. But with that particular shot, you know, and I guess the reason I was bringing up Mike is he was very understanding when Rolf would have a single shot take, you know, an hour and a half to set up and shoot. You know, that would expand, and then but something else in the schedule would have to contract because we still had a fixed number of days and a fixed amount of money. But Mike was imaginative enough that he accepted Rolf's justification for how important that shot was. And what we ended up doing to get that shot is that we put the actor Alexis Arquette, who sadly is no longer with us, but an incredibly talented actor from the Arquette family. And we put him on a dolly, and we put the camera on a Ubangi to offset it away from the center, as far away from Alexis as we could. And, you know, because you don't want to get right up on him and have that weird distortion.
Right.
But we put him in the center of the dolly. And we took all of the handlebars on the back, which would have been behind him, and we removed them. And then we rigged a device. I don't remember what it was, but we rigged something so the dolly grip could turn the dolly. We put the wheels in roundy round mode, which lets you rotate it around its central axis.
Wow.
So in that way, he was sitting on that dolly, and that camera was fixed, and it spun. And then the other thing we had to do is, like, we had to isolate all our cables. I think we probably unplugged video assist. We shot it on 35 millimeter film. There was no digital then. There was video cameras, but that wasn't going to look good. But anyway, we spun it around, and then for 360, I had to make sure you didn't see any lights. You know, so we came, that ceiling you see, because it's a set, was artificial. So we could remove the ceiling and I could come up and light it. Again, you know, how do you make it look good when you limit where you can come from? And so we just finessed it until it did the thing we wanted it to do. And all those lights playing on his face, I love how those lights change. And anybody who's curious about this film and that shot, if you go to my website, there's a montage on the feature page, and that shot is on that montage.
Wow.
And there's a lot of other shots from the film on that montage.
Good to know. One reason I want you to see As the Earth Turns is Richard Lyford, when he was 20, he made this film, and he has a shot at the end of that film where things are spinning. And he uses and he's using 16 millimeter, you know, camera at that time, because that's all he could afford. You know, he was in Seattle when he did it, but you'll appreciate his stuff. And he used that same technique in another short that I have at a similar kind of a thing. So it was kind of a bit of a brand that he had created early.
The movie magic is always my favorite. You know, when we create an illusion, and sometimes that becomes necessary when things don't go right. I shot the first 10 minutes of Jeepers Creepers Reborn, which was just announced yesterday, so I can finally start talking about it.
Really?
But you know, we had some situations, you know, where we had some logistical hiccups, which could have potentially shut us down. But, you know, we had the tools that we could punt and go a different direction. And, you know, I'll give you one, for instance. Hopefully it's not spilling too many beans. And this really wasn't an instance where we got shut down by the logistics. It's just that the location didn't work. There's a scene where these characters are driving in a car, and they go past this old house and they see something that catches their eye. And we found this perfect house, but the road was way, way, way back. and there were trees, and you really could not get a good shot of what we needed to see from that road. So what I suggested to the director is, let's shoot the car and the actors on green screen, and then let's take a drone and get close to the house and fly at car level and get that plate from exactly where we wish that road was. And that's what we did. And we were able to make that shot work. But we had to, we created movie magic. We created something that didn't exist because we needed it to exist to tell our story.
Yeah. Well, Lyford, he scratches on film. He does all sorts of stuff. All right, we're running out of time here. I don't want to put anybody to sleep. But so currently, Jeepers Creepers Reborn, that's coming.
I only did 10 minutes. I was up for the whole film, but the pandemic shut me down because I couldn't get into the UK, which sucks because I would have loved to do it. Right now, yeah, I mean, I don't know what's next. There's a lot of conversations happening. Maybe, well, obviously there's a sequel to California Christmas has been greenlit. Sean Piccinino has got some of his own projects. ESX has some projects. Sean and I are developing one of those projects, a sci-fi project. We have another fellow named Gabriel Tice who has got a new hot film out right now, who's kind of helping us put wheels on that one. And I'm developing a historical biopic with another friend. And, then there's conversations, people all the time are saying, well, we'd love you to shoot this movie or read this script. Yeah. So a lot of things in the air. Nothing has landed on the calendar, but so many exciting prospects. And I'm really happy about that.
Well, I'm trying to develop I have a mini doc about Richard Lyford, and that's coming. I just got Disney finally gave me okay on some stuff because he worked there after when he went to Hollywood. And then I'm actually writing up the first 20 years as a biopic. So maybe I'll hire you as cinematographer on that. You would be the appropriate guy.
I'll be available. Let's do it.
Yeah. No, excellent. And so your goal in the future is more of the same.
Well, no, yeah, more of the same in the sense of different.
The brand new. You're going to become an insurance salesman.
No, not that kind of different. Look, hey, I'll just put it out there. My dream job would be like a sci-fi horror anthology, like Twilight Zone or Outer Limits.
Hey, I got a track on Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the TV show. It was like a 50s Muzak thing. Plucky string. Bloop, 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 bloop. That's a good show.
Also would love to do a Western. I like period. I like period pieces. I was going to say that, people often ask, what's your favorite kind of film or your favorite genre? And my answer is my favorite films are the ones that take me someplace that I can't go outside my front door.
Well, the biopic would be 1920s and 30s Seattle. I want to film it here because it put everybody to work. And the score to that film is period orchestral and jazz. So yeah.
But what I guess what I mean by that though too is that it it could be another time, it could be another place, it could be with people I'm unlikely to meet.
Right.
So that's the fun thing to me is to be transported, and hopefully that's what we all do in everything. From your music to my cinematography to our collective storytelling is take people to a place that's pleasant or fun or nostalgic or meaningful and somehow imparts new knowledge.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll play a little bit of music while we're going out. Thanks for listening today. Hey. Well, thank you very much, Brad.
You're welcome. It's been fun. I've
been excellent.
Enjoyed being in your virtual theater.
Yeah. So everybody, thank you for listening, and hopefully we'll see you at a future one, if you can stand it. But again, thank you, Brad, and maybe we'll do another one and continue the conversation down the road here. I'm enjoying this quite a bit. So anyway, thank you very much. We'll see you next time.
Take care. Thank you.